the cloud. All right, we are recording, I believe. Thank you.
Alan is still saying he's muted. If you could try to see if you can unmute him.
All righty, I'm trying.
It's not on purpose, Alan.
There we go. There you are.
Y'all are my beta test. If we get through this, we're switching to Zoom for the calls because it looks like everybody's got a much easier path when it's Zoom. Am I correct?
Yes, this was much easier to get in.
Yes.
The WebEx application.
In fairness, I don't think it's WebEx. I think it's WebEx in the hands of BT Law. It's WebEx in the hands of a law firm because they got barriers and barriers and barriers and barriers. It drives me crazy.
I'm trying to figure out how everybody else just has their name, but then Ellen has Ellen Torbert Southwest Airlines. She's got that.
Because I have to put that on all my Zoom calls for these other meetings. I'm going to take that off.
That's hilarious.
You can really put whatever you want. Gilbert is the answer. You can call yourself whatever you want to be called.
Whatever you want to.
And whatever title you like. Now's the opportunity in the world of Zoom. You know, if you would like to be czar, you can. If you've ever had a inkling for that as a title.
Crown.
Yeah, that's right. So I believe we have Rhonda, and I think that's the only other external guest right now, right? Or attendee.
But I think we go ahead and start.
Okay.
106.
Lori, I thought we would start by you giving us an update of where we are, and then we want to talk with Alan. Had some questions and kind of recircling back to the SWOT analysis, and so.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. We repeated some of the slides, and I'll share this deal, take over at some point, but we repeated some of the slides because we had new members, and we did send this out to the whole board. We did get some comments back of people who appreciated the lean material. It's a simple pictorial of how this works. So the one chart that we sent you showing the different contracting relationships, how all this comes out, and Dee will take us through a little more of that, the money. The last thing in the packet is a draft. That very colorful, I was having a moment. Very colorful dashboard. Dashboards are all in vogue, and all of the other boards are exploring ways to give a dashboard effect for childcare, especially in our board packets. So this is not definitive. This was simply, here's what we know. Here's the kind of data we think you would be interested in. But we intend for this to just be a working draft today. What other material goes on it? What color scheme? What kind of treatment? Should it be a publication document, something that we can flop out like a newsletter every month from the chair? I mean, we can do this, but we think it should be the task force's sort of statement in the board packet, since we haven't had one. Something that's, instead of a report, it's every month, it's a statistical and a piece. So hopefully you like that. Dee, talk them through where we are in childcare, because boy, it's been a crazy 7 months, 6.5 months.
It has been. It's constant change, but actually it's not all bad change. It's actually been pretty good. Things that we really didn't expect that would happen coming from TWC, things to help our providers and trying to keep providers sustained and ready for the economy to come back alive and people to go back to work and have a place for their kids to go and have some quality care. So things have been changed in a manner that we never even expected. We're paying providers that have been closed through September 30th is the last day we'll be cutting it off. That was just the stabilization grant. It will end, and that was something that the state implemented to help those that were temporarily closed during COVID. So we had about 20 that have closed since then. So that's kind of where we are with closed providers. Those that are temporary closed, that's a little bit less, maybe about 12 that have closed permanently that we are aware of, that's in our system. So that's just based upon information that has been reported to us.
So Dee, those, based upon those that are closed, what happens to those kids?
Well, those kids can be, if they are in our programs, they can be reassigned, relocated to other providers. Parents can contact us and they'll be reassigned.
And we feel confident there are slots available at other providers?
As of right now, we have not had any issues with being notified that there is not enough slots.
I think my big concern, Gilbert, has been that the centers are closing probably because of so many no-shows and drops. If you're not a part of the subsidized system and you simply drop, no one's paying you to hold that slot till the kids come back. So some of these centers, and I've gotten this from Child Care Group and from Early Matters, some of the centers who were not part of the subsidy program have fared very poorly through this. They should have been part of the subsidy program because the state paid for vacant slots. If you had a referral March 13, if your kid was enrolled, whether you show up or not, we paid for those slots, Dee, to the end of May.
Oh no, we're still paying right now.
Okay. And then they came up with this other mechanism, which was a sustainability grant. So they've done everything they can to throw money at the problem to preserve the network of providers so we'd have something to come back to. And I just want to draw your attention to that draft dashboard. It's a little hard. For the first time, we've run, where are the children's parents working? And we came up with Walmart, Amazon, Parkland, DISD, and Kroger. But the parents are between, there's not more than 50 working at any one of these, not less than 50, and not more than 250 working for any one of these. I was thinking we'd see a more pocket, if you would, of where are the employees that are depending on childcare, but it's quite diverse. It's spread all over Dallas County. But I thought that was a beginning to say, where do people work? And the fact that we show 8,992 parents are working because we're keeping 16,000 kids in care. That's an amazing conversation that we need to have as a board because it is about, Susan. You're on mute. Oh, do I have to do something? No, I'm sorry. Please, my apologies, guys. There you go.
Okay, so the 16,000 in care, is that inclusive of children that are not currently attending?
Yes.
So we don't, so you know, how many of those are actually kids that are showing up, or do we know that?
We know based upon those that are reporting in the frontline tool. And I could get that number, but yes, each week we're reporting to the state based upon providers reporting information to a system.
Right. Yeah, mainly I'm just wondering, of that 16,000, how many after September 30th are going to still be in the system? You know, is it half or a third, or, you know, what? Yeah.
That's something we can look at based upon the data that's being entered into that one system.
Yeah.
Because we're not reporting attendance.
Right.
We don't have to report that to us, but we're asking them statewide. We're asking providers to report it to the frontline database that has been created for the state.
Just quick question, and like before, just thanks thanks as always, but like especially the last 6 months. I mean, what a crazy bout of whitewater rafting you've been doing with childcare. Just so I like in its most simple form, like if it weren't a COVID year, and what's the compliance threshold? So we're trying to serve at least blank number of kids with the dollars that we have. What would the answer to that be?
This year, the answer was 16,000 that we had. Well, it was a little bit over 16,000. I want to say it's 16,400 or something. That was our normal performance. It actually changed we were set at 15 at October. It was 15,209 in October, and it increased in February, right before COVID, to 16,427. And then now it has not changed for us just yet. As a matter of fact, TWC is having a call right now about performance for October 1. So we will know what that is for October 1. They are projecting it's 13,000.
400 and something.
Yeah, a little bit over 13,000, which we are have some attrition occurring right now. We're coming down. This performance is based on the actual report from TWC for July 2020. We should be receiving August, hopefully today, because it is the 25th, hopefully by today or Monday, and we'll know where we are better. But I mean, we're seeing the trend already coming down by real numbers.
And then my follow-up to that is, so that's 16,000 or whatever that number ends up, being and normalizing it. That's kind of like a universal goal for like the entire region we serve, that much every year. And
A day. So yeah, so it could be serving a whole lot more, but it's the daily figure, right?
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, but it's the overall region, and I know how hard that is just in itself, given how high those thresholds have been getting set. But then, have we ever, as a board or internally, set sub goals based off of sub regions within Dallas? I mean, have we ever broken Dallas County up into other geographic locations and set specific goals there?
No, dear, and we're not going to do that for the politics of the moment. When you start slicing and dicing, remember we have 4 major cities that sign off on our agreement. They could all start demanding that we account for their money by Irving, Mesquite, Grand Prairie, Garland. Then you could get into city council in Dallas wanting to see exactly how many slots each of the 14 districts get. So no, we have never carved this county up for anything because, frankly, the city of Dallas drinks more than everybody else, right? Let's just go.
Yeah.
Right. But even within the city of Dallas, we've never said, hey, we love, we think that based off of the need or our goals in the southern sector that this would be either the childcare need or setting some kind of goals in that area. And it's just a fact base. It's not, not that we should or shouldn't have. I just making sure we've never done that in the past.
Not set goals. Now you can analyze it by where most of the seats are, for sure, but
Right.
never, not to in my memory, Lori, and it's not going to be as long as yours. We've never had goals.
Also, guys, it's income means tested. So it is unlikely that it isn't exactly where you think the slots are going.
Yeah.
Mismatch is the availability of quality care in, let's say, Pleasant Grove versus need in Pleasant Grove. So those are the kinds of maps we've drawn to talk about where to instill more quality dollars or where to go to correct deficiencies. That's been a mapping conversation.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's kind of where I'm going. We can talk about it more, but lots of decisions follow a cascading. So, if in a perfect world, we think there's a blank number of need in a particular region, but the barrier is the number of quality seats in that region. And then we have a decision on where quality dollars go and how we allocate, very limited resources. Is there a framework for meeting some board set goals there or not? And it sounds like the answer to that right now is no, but we'd also have to be very careful if we were to do anything to make sure that we understand all the dynamics at play, especially given multiple cities and some of those things that you highlighted.
There's a problem for me that the state is pushing us too hard. I say that they push us to be the pack mule of the state because we are so cost efficient. And it is so obvious on the paperwork that they're discussing right now in Austin that it's a good thing I'm not available for the call because I may raise hell in a way I shouldn't. We're doing this at such a low cost because our survey of costs, Susan, came back to hurt us. The new survey is worse than the other 2 areas of the region. And so we're struggling. They want us to do more and more and more and more. and we can't. So that's one of the reasons I kind of cut off negotiation and said Child Care Group needs more information about the goals and the expectations before I can sign a contract with them. Because it looks like they need more staffing than we have money to accommodate based upon the state's math. Why does Dallas have to do 13,000 kids? Why? Yes, there's a need, but also we'd like to balance this out a little bit, but they keep hammering me.
Let me stop there and ask, does everyone on the call understand what the survey is and how that drives costs? And I don't know, I mean, if y'all do, then we don't need to go on that, but if you don't.
No, I'd appreciate just giving me the elevator speech, Susan, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Well, I will, Lori can do that because my elevator speech is a very tall building. Yeah.
Okay. Every year now, it was every other year, but I think they're going to every year. UT is doing a survey to find out what the true cost of care is in each community. They're using that survey to measure our reimbursement rates and pretty much put a ceiling on us. They use that every year. So we had raised rates, if you remember, then the state raised rates. But now we're up against a wall that looks like the rates we're paying are about as far as they'll let us go because we cannot pay more than the market published rate. But in Tarrant County, they're paying goo gobs more and go to Frisco, go to Plain, you know what I mean. If you go to the region, you're getting a mix. When you stay in Dallas County, you're getting low cost, and it's not fair to our train. It's not fair to our centers. But I can't ask our parents to pay market rate. They're not
Right.
making money to pay market rate.
Yeah. So the
Sorry.
bulk of the centers are in Dallas County, but they also are serving a population that is paying as much as they can. And so they will not raise their rates because the parents couldn't afford that. So that undermines I mean, that's my terminology, but it undercuts what the actual true cost of care is because it's oversampling disproportionately where people are paying what providers are charging what the market can bear for their market.
And we find, Gilbert, sadly, when we set this parent copay and the rate, a lot of times the provider will just let the copay go.
Right.
Because they know the parent can't pay that extra money. It's a sad situation.
Yeah.
So the providers have been in good shape during this time because they are being paid what we expected they would be paid throughout. Dee, is that fair? They didn't have to eat any costs during this.
No, not from people, you know, the kids that were enrolled. They may have lost the private pay, which is probably a good portion of their income, depending on what their ratio is, or who they're serving.
Now, what we're into at a statewide discussion, and this is among the executive directors, why are people not returning to work? And that's probably the workforce question of the day. I've heard in North Central the theory that, well, it's because we paid them too much in unemployment pandemic benefit. Well, sorry, 600 has been gone since July, 300 has been gone since the 1st of this month. Maybe they're still making a little bit, but 26 weeks is all you get. And then you get a 13 additional weeks for real need. And the state has not resumed job search. We got a heads up today that it's an October discussion now with the governor's policies. So we're hosting a job event today and yesterday, 5,000 bona fide jobs, real jobs, real income. 1,300 people by about 11 today have even come in and registered. The statement I've heard statewide is people don't want to work. And I've countered with people are afraid of COVID. And people have children at home who are being educated at home. Where are you going to put your child? And mothers with a small infant, they don't want to risk it. If the child is under 2, they're not putting them back in daycare for now, childcare. They're not. They're keeping them home as much as they can because they're working from home. So I think we've got to do our best to give that full picture from Dallas. And I wish we could do survey work. I don't want to assume, but I also don't want to assume the worst, that people just don't want to work. I don't think that's the key. I think there are too many impediments.
Lori, can you unmute Ellen? She's asking. I think she wants to.
Yes, I'm sorry, guys. As I say, I'm figuring this out. I think the best thing, guys, is once you unmute,
Don't mute yourself again.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. I wanted to ask, has COVID impacted any of the centers that are needing to close? What's been the impact during this time on the number of locations that are available?
Oh, well, on availability, I'm not sure, but I do know that if they have a case or have been exposed, they are allowed to close to clean. And if they go beyond 2 weeks, they're asking us individually for permission, but we have to submit that to the state. And the state
I
makes
see.
the call if they can stay closed longer, and we will pay for those for the children that are enrolled. So
Okay,
it's one, Rhonda is telling me it's 1 to 2 weeks, 1 day
1
to
to 2 weeks.
but if they
Okay,
go beyond that, they do ask for, they let us know.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
don't mute again.
I won't.
Ken's the only member that's not back in, but I think he's okay. I keep trying to unmute, but I think he's on another call. There is the fine detail. If we could go to your second page, D, behind the initial graphic with all the money and the people, and just talk about the confines. Sadly, we're only given, I mentioned already how costly it is to run a program this size and how they expect us to keep doing it at a bare minimum. But beyond that, what else is on this chart that's very small print? We're gonna have to fix that. It's really tiny.
Yes, it's tiny because we've added the external child care projects on there, which are all care, well, with the exception of North Texas Cares, this has all been presented in the board meetings. These are dollars that we've set up an application process for the providers to submit to us, and we're paying the $3,000 or $5,000 micro grant that is to the provider to help them with any operational cost. It's a one-time thing with the city of Irving, the Dallas County, and city of Dallas will be starting soon. We have not initiated that one just yet. But we've been paying out and providers have been applying. It has slowed down a little bit. We've seen slow response with the city of Irving, and they have two different programs, one for the provider and one for the parent. If the parent is actually going back to work, the city of Irving is, if they are a resident, they're paying for the care, and it is not income based. So any individual that is going back to work that is outside the home, they can apply for 3 months of care through the City of Irving project. So that the other one that City of Irving is doing is $5,000 micro grant to the provider. And each of the City of Irving and City of Dallas have done their own outreach in addition to what we're doing, what Child Care Group is doing with the pool of applicants that we have, or providers that we have, informing them. So this has been a good addition to all the other stuff that we have been doing with TWC that has allowed us to do with our regular money, but this was CARES Act dollars as well as North Texas Cares dollars was helping us offset some of the providers that didn't meet the qualifications of the other programs. So that is what's added to the list. We've updated this chart from our last meeting where we have received substantial amount of dollars from TWC for all of these different activities during COVID. So that has been included into Child Care Group's contract. This is not our normal. It's probably about anywhere close to $20 to $25 million in addition to what we would normally get for sure, with all the different activities that has been added during this time. We've increased the operations cost a little bit to allow the transition. We're working at home and making sure that we have systems in place and equipment in place to keep things going. So that has been a change in trying to just keep up because there's been a lot of change. We've had to assign, Child Care Group has assigned different people to do different things with all the changes that we have going on. So that has been a challenge, but seems to have worked through it. Processes we're communicating just about daily. I'm talking to Sherry and Rhonda probably on a daily basis now. So childcare has taken a big toll on our system, which is good.
Imagine.
We, yeah, I would never thought I'd be so entwined in childcare like this, but yes, but it's been a good experience. So you'll see that change on here. It looks drastic, but it's because of COVID. Match dollars and Department of Family Protective Services dollars are included. And you'll see on the dashboard, we kind of put those numbers out on the side for protective care because that's not part of our target, but that is a population that we serve based on referrals coming from that system. So those dollars are included in there as well.
Have protective care referrals gone up at all during COVID, or have they been about stable?
I think they've been about stable. That's not a lot of children served there.
No, I just wondered if we'd seen, anecdotally we hear that there are fewer abuse cases reported. I don't know, that's not anecdotal. I think that's the case. I didn't know if removals had changed at all.
And I will make sure that I report that back to you.
Okay.
Susan, something of concern, CPS is not going to come back from virtual, from what we understand.
Say that again?
They may not come back from a virtual workforce.
Oh, yeah.
This is proved to
Who
be
is that, Lori?
CPS.
The Child Protective Services Unit. May
So
not.
they will not come back to virtual. They will go virtual.
They will stay virtual
They will stay virtual. So they will not
Oh.
be in person. Okay.
because so
Okay.
much of their work is in field visits.
Yeah.
But I don't think the field visits were very robust during this 6 months. Otherwise, but who would report it? The kids are not in school.
Yeah.
There's a lot here that's uncomfortable, believe me. From my standpoint, I worry what is going on without our usual check-in point to feed children and to observe children for whether or not they're being properly cared for.
Mhm.
Tough times, guys. I can't imagine poor families and kids who feel isolated.
Yeah, there's a lot of, my wife's a professional counselor, so there's a lot of this telecounseling going on, and it's just not the same. I mean, it's really not the same as meeting face to face with the family and looking at body language and, because you really can't tell what's going on off the screen, that somebody's directing someone to say anything, or you just don't know.
Right.
Quality dollars is just about the same. We will be adding a few more dollars. We're asking for an extension to TWC next week to go past October 31st. They're allowing us to ask for an extension to December 31st. We have been allowed to do some different activities than what we would normally do since things came to a halt. No assessments have been done face-to-face, so that is funds that we have not spent. But now we're starting to do that virtually. We actually are leading that for the state in partnership with North Central and Tarrant with doing virtual assessments to get people on TRS so we can have more quality providers ready to go when people return back to work. So we will be adding a few more dollars to Child Care Group. We're trying to look at our allocation and see where we are, what's unobligated right now, what is not spending to determine where we go forward. We have provided PPE to over 300 providers doing this time, spending nearly $150,000 on those things. And we plan to look at that again and probably do another round of that to assist with them having the necessary supplies on hand. So,
And kudos to Child Care Group.
yes.
We now have Tori on the call, Sherry and Rhonda. They were all muted, but these guys have really stepped up. Their team has stepped up. They've done drive-bys. You know, people come through, drive through, get curbside service, get their box of equipment and supplies. And Rhonda has been very diligent, the whole team, but Rhonda sponsors a once a week check-in call with the providers that's very popular, a coffee chat. They're struggling. I will tell you the two complaints that I got. One was from Sharon, our past board member who does run a center. Both were complaining that they are not prepared to educate children when they leave school and are there to do their homework online. They want us to pay, and how, I don't know. I've explained that to them. I think it's a source, perhaps a conversation for private money. They would like us to pay for them to hire tech staff, tutorial staff to work the afternoons to help kids with passwords, login difficulties, and then assignments.
Yeah.
That's sad, but that's what has come through very recently. I've gotten those two complaints.
Well, that makes sense. So can I ask I know this is probably not a very smart question, but the total CCA contract is this year 121 million plus, correct?
Yes, as of right now.
So does the quality then, what's the quality set aside for that? Does it still the 4% on that, or is it applied to a different number?
No, the 2% that we get
Oh,
is
2%, okay.
based upon our original CCF allocation only.
Okay. Okay, so it's not the additional dollars.
No.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, yeah.
What is that total amount?
For this year, it was 2.6, but 738,000 is specific to mentors and assessors. That it is totally based upon that. So
1.9 is stuff that there might be flexibility on, and 700,000 is more prescriptive and or more confined in terms of what the use can be.
absolutely. And we are, I think we are in the 3rd year procurement for quality services. So we do have the vendors that are listed on the previous chart with the Dallas College, Campfire of Texas, First 3 Years.
One-offs Together for Children.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done multiple projects with them, and also we have some professional development trainers that are on a vendors list to help us do some of the trainings. So, but we did have, as I said, we have a little bit more flexibility right now because the state has issued that. And I think that's where some of these things are coming from with the complaints. But because some of the funds were previously allocated, that's what we're looking at to see what is not spending, to see how we can reallocate some of the funds that have gone out to some of the providers already.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then just one more question, just I guess, was it 121 million, whatever it is, any year, maybe we say 100 million just to use a round number so that I can understand the percentages. But like one thing that I'm really appreciative of is just how fiscally responsible the team always is, and you know, if anything, fiscally conservative, which makes me feel good as a member of governance, right? But just as a fact-based matter, like, what would be the maximum amount of that, if it was 100 million, that could be allowed for like management from our vendors?
Operations.
Yeah, operations versus, you know, and regardless of what it is today, because I know we've been more, frankly, fiscally responsible in other parts of the state on this, but just what's the range that we see across the state of how much gets allocated for that overhead?
Lori, you can take it on, but I know it's a big range because we complain about this all the time because we're so lean on it.
Yeah.
And when the state issue out this the projections and the estimates, we are always in that category where we're much lower than everybody else, and so this is when we say we get penalized for being efficient.
This year's money, D, is like 6.4 mil or 5.8. What is this one's?
It was it's actually 5.8. That's including our admin, the board admin, and the operational costs.
And
So we're running at 4.5%.
go ahead.
We're running at 4.5% overhead right now.
Always. Yeah.
Always. Yeah.
That's kind of our benchmark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other regions in the state, what's the high? Do we have any sense as to, like, you know,
What's the ceiling? Yeah. And what's the floor?
Paso, what are they? You know, I'm kidding, but like, what's the highest?
One of the worst is Tarrant, and the other worst is Abilene. Go figure. I'm going to step over here and find it, D. Y'all keep chatting, but I've got the chart handy.
Right.
So I think for a long time, Tarrant County CCA also held the Abilene contract. I don't know if that's still the case, but I think that's probably why those two are tied together.
Yes,
because CCA managed both those contracts, right?
and I think they are no longer going to do that in Abilene. I think it's out for procurement. I think they've let it go.
Yeah. But it has been for like way since before
time.
me. Yeah.
Yes, a long time.
And whatever it is, and it doesn't have to. We don't have to answer it now.
No.
I just love to know if is that 6%? Is that 9%? Like what?
Yeah. What's the
The
difference?
Yeah, it's on the data that TWC have analyzed for us, and it's statewide, so we can look at that.
Thanks so much.
So Susan, what's kind of the solution here that we're trying to solve for? Is it being able to get more kids? Is it quality? Is it reallocating dollars? What's our end game here? What are we trying to get?
I think our end game, thank you, good question, Gilbert. So, you know, for this committee, one, I think the first order of business was for our board to have a clear understanding of what just overall what the landscape is. I think in terms of parameters, the state sets the number of kids in care, so we don't have a lot of wiggle room. I mean, that is set externally.
Yes. What leverage do we have that we can pull that can make a difference?
I'm going to speak to that in the SWOT. Pretty
yeah, I think, but Alan can talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I want to step back and see, just in the vein of understanding and everybody having a common point of reference. Does everyone, board members on this call, do you understand what the quality dollars are and how that's determined, how the percent and what they are to be used for? Is that a common?
I'm not sure I'm clear on the percentage.
Okay, and how that gets figured?
Yeah.
So can you talk about that, Dee?
I can. So across the state, TWC allocates 2% of the child care development fund. And it's that particular grant that allows, they do it off the top. It's 2% off the top. And in that fund, we are allowed to pay for operation and board admin cost as well. We don't get to do that from our local match dollars anymore. That's strictly separate. We do get a little bit off of the Department of Family Protective Services money, like 5% off of that. That's based upon the number of kids served. So yeah, the 2% comes just strictly off one funding source, which is the child
Federal
care
dollars. Yeah. And and I think at the federal level, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a required 4% set aside to those dollars, and the state takes some of that money off before it goes to the workforce boards to help pay for childcare licensing. Is that still the case? Maybe Rhonda or Sherry. I don't know if they probably can't speak, but I think that there is the 4% set aside, but the state utilizes some of that money for quality activities, which childcare licensing is one.
And
And
the,
But
I
I
don't know
could
the
be wrong.
percentage, but they do
Yeah.
set aside money to do quality as well.
Right,
They do.
right.
and that 2%, is it 2% of this 121?
No,
No,
it's our original allocation. Actually,
Yeah.
if I look at our board packet, I can tell you what
Yeah.
that.
No problem.
yeah. So the 121 is inclusive of additional dollars that came down that the quality set aside did not apply to
Okay.
because it was an extraordinary circumstance, or it was new dollars.
Gotcha.
So for whatever reason, that
Some
formula
CARES
didn't
Act
apply.
money and-
It was
Okay.
CARES Act money and quality dollars didn't apply
Kind
to
of
that.
non-recurring stuff. I got you. Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Our efficiency conversation. Estimated norms for the end of BCY 20 for the Dallas board is $1.25 per kid. So they're gonna elevate that to $1.28. Woohoo! Now you got Austin, and Austin and Rural Cap seem to be the outliers this year, really out there. 260 and 265 per. And the state is raising those to, let me see. Surely not. $3.09
Oh, wow.
and $3.80.
That's probably right.
So on the surface, I mean, to me, that says that if they were doing like we were doing, they could serve more kids, right? Is that simple?
Yeah, so they've made, yes. So that's the
So we,
choices.
I mean, on the hand,
Yeah.
we could do that same thing. We just be serving less kids, and we wouldn't be hitting the numbers that the state is allocated for us, right?
Correct.
You remember my pack mule conversation though? This is what annoys me.
Yeah.
Why
Okay.
should Dallas carry the load? And yet, guys, I don't have to apologize to anybody about where we spend our money and whether or not we're doing the best we can do to serve enough kids. We don't take anything off the top. A lot of the boards take a very large sum of money off the top to operate these programs. North Central is operating at 250 and they're going to go up to 272. Tarrant is operating at 229 and they're going to go up to 238. And we're at 128. So
So to me, like if I was the daycare provider, I want to go to one of those markets rather than Dallas. I mean, if it's about money, and being compensated, if I could, I mean, to me, I could get more money for the same service that I'm doing in another market.
but you get less volume. They'll pay a higher rate, but they won't serve as many kids. So it's 6 to 1.
Yeah.
It evens out. So, and again, this 125 to 128 is compared to the 260 in Austin, or the 125 is based on the market survey?
No, this was
No,
the
okay.
conversation. Remember the
Okay,
4%?
that's the ops conversation, which it's driven by, that's a local decision for the board?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Except the state has decided to norm it. So
Got
they've
it.
history, and
Mhm.
it is an unfortunate rendition of continuous improvement. Instead of looking at all and forming even a bell curve to say what's most efficient, they simply say, according to your history, how efficient can you be? And they've agreed this year to give everybody a little room, but 128 versus, and the way they justify it is we have such a massive system. Well, North Central's catching up with us. North Central has a very large budget and a very large system for those 14 counties, but they serve a very small number of who they could serve, and yet gave us, if y'all recall, they gave us $12 million to
Mhm.
help us serve more kids. So they're being very good partners, but they do run a very expensive system on the admin ops.
I'd love to like just quickly circle back to the point Gilbert was making and just talk about that for a minute, because I think Gilbert, I think you were honing in on something really, really essential. And I just kind of start by also like we should just acknowledge that everyone in the entire, whether it's the childcare operator, whether it's our team at Workforce Solutions, whether it's childcare group, everybody is working in an undercapitalized environment, right? Everyone is stretching dollars and being asked to do more than they're actually being paid to do. So really difficult, but I think that tension, the tensions you're pointing out are kind of at the core of like our decision points ultimately, right? Is it more important to serve to try to serve 18,000 kids, or is there a way that we serve 16,000 kids, but a big portion of those 16,000 kids have a higher quality experience? Is it, you know, more important to try to give a little bit of a break to the small business owner and stabilize the industry, or is it more important to kind of stretch that and put pressure on the state to try it out? There's all of these different pieces, and I think that there's compliance, right, which is where we have no, you know, where
Yeah.
doing just a great job. If we have to serve this many kids, we have to do it. But then we've got an opportunity, I think, to set some board driven, if it's a choice between quality and numbers, what is our philosophy on that? And that's there's not a right or wrong answer, but I think that's where the discussion point can occur.
Yeah, you know, when off the surface, you know, when you say we could handle more kids, but if we do that, so right now we've got a level of kids that are getting quality X. If we do more kids, those kids' quality will go up, but then there's another group of kids that now are 0. And to me, you know, something is better than 0, but I mean, I understand it's a balancing act. It really is.
Mhm.
And don't forget, there is also this conversation, and I'm going to draw it, Susan, to your new favorite project, Aspire
Mm-hmm.
and Thrive. If the people of Dallas cannot afford the care, we cannot raise the rate, even if it is in the quality argument. That's where this market survey is killing us. So the market survey is dictating that the people of Dallas will not pay more than that. It's sort of like a commodities conversation. How much would we pay for a mom and pop shop to serve lunch? Well, you can't charge more just because they charge more in Austin than what somebody in that neighborhood in Dallas would be willing to pay. So boy, that's a tough one, but it takes us back to the core conversation, Susan, that we've been having since March. If people in Dallas don't make $50,000 a year to support a family, they can't afford the basic things in this community, like childcare for their children and quality food on the table and paying utilities and connectivity costs. This thing is very wrapped. And I don't want to segregate it too much. It is a workforce conversation.
Yeah. So if, you know, 20%, let's say, or 24% of people of childbearing age, so 24 to 35-year-olds roughly, are making, only that many are making a living wage, which is only $50,000 a year, then you're right. Then that's what the market's going to bear. And so, yeah, so you couldn't raise rates, but going back to Alan's point, where do we make some, you know, where do we make a focus in terms of, you know, do we say we have got to double down on some quality for, and that would inherently limit the number or decrease the number of kids served, but the kids served would get a higher quality? Or do we say, you know, put all the money into more slots? I mean, I know that that's simplifying what you said, Alan, but that's kind of the seminal question, right?
I think that's right. I think those are some of the tension points and where the discussion can take place. That would be my opinion. I also just want to point out one other wrinkle in this, because I think Lori is 100% right. You know, to say, look, we're the workforce board, and this is a workforce conversation. I think it's also important to say that while we're in the state of Texas and we've got to meet Texas compliance, and Texas has decided to take these federal child care funding streams and organize it through our workforce commission because of the clear tie to workforce, that these at a federal level, some of these funding streams are not just workforce funding streams, but they're focused and centered on children. And so that's really where a lot of the tension comes in. The priority of this is coming through a workforce board versus the intent of the federal funding stream, which has a lot to do with the development of kids as well. And we're tasked with balancing that, of course, knowing we have to meet the compliance standards of workforce.
So I guess it goes back kind of that question. So if we, like today, if we say, okay, we're going to increase quality, And if we did that, we take dollars away to increase quality. That means there'd be fewer kids in care. What happens to those kids?
Gilbert, let me start with the facts though. The state will not let us move the money. Legislatively, they have determined that the 2% is all we can spend.
Okay.
They took that off the table.
Okay.
And to Alan's point, yes and no, Alan. The problem I have with childcare is most of the rules we are following are purely federal rules. The fact that it runs through the workforce system makes very little difference. I think we run it more efficiently than Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
And that's probably to their credit. But would it be any different running Texas through a different entity? No, sir. We're basically having to adopt anything HHS sends us. And we are having to say that is where we live. Dee, am I off on that one?
No, that is correct. I mean, the 2% is set aside just to help us get more quality. And they're pushing us toward Texas Rising Star as the quality, right? So we know that there are some areas that don't have any quality providers. So yes, we should be probably making a extra effort to enhance the services in those areas if there is a need for care there. Take Irving, for example. We noticed that from the last meeting. We saw it clearly. It's kind of a desert area. It's very few quality providers there. But then we also see that there is not a real high demand for care either. It's something happening in Irving. We're experiencing with the 2 projects that we have. We're not seeing the outcome that you would think we would get, but maybe it's something we're not doing. We're not talking enough in Irving. We're not finding out. Maybe we need to do some survey work in Irving to find out what's going on. But yes, those are the type of things that where we can put more focus, Alan, on those areas that we know we see the need with that 2% to increase Texas Rising Star providers in the area. So
a little conversation we have with Dallas College, just to say they are on it. They know what's happened. Their Mesquite campus and partly Brookhaven used to be the only game in town for getting a credential in childcare. And that was kind of robust for 25 years. And it has lost its charm because it doesn't lead to money. You can get that certificate and you can go to work for a Head Start or DISD in the old days. Now we're talking to them about a Department of Education, because that's really where college is going. And what can they do with the money we've previously invested? Of the money, Dee, how much of that goes to Rob and what's in their quality contract?
300,000.
300,000. And that was intended to train a bunch of people, but who's got more time now? People if you're in childcare, you're working probably 6 until 8 most days, because you got to clean before, clean after. We've got, cleaning now. The pandemic is so much on everybody's first tab, must do the work. So I think we've got an opportunity, Alan, to resculpt how we deal with quality. We got a lot of people wanting to play in the quality area. And the only one thing I just feel that is not appropriate at this time is a fee-for-service conversation. So we've heard a few, and one would be a temporary service, let's say, to have some staff come in and out. Guys, I can't fill the jobs we have. There are no people wanting to jump into temporary work in childcare. Plus, temporary work might pay that person more than the childcare worker that's already there. There are all kinds of conversations, but my goodness, it's a lot of noise, and I would love for us to get it into before the procurement. And the procurement would be next spring, Dee?
I think so. I think because we're in the 3rd year, so it should be coming up.
And we could do it early if we needed to.
Yeah.
Alan, if we craft a design that leads to 4-star providers, that's the only thing with the state. That is the one TWC creation, is the Texas Rising Star. And there's a lot of criticism about that. I've opted that ought to be part of licensing. It ought to be connected, and licensing isn't having it. But we are told we must create more 4-star providers. Quality is the goal. Take it from there. What else could we do with quality? You see the projects that are on here. 501 ops, yes and no. It's got mixed results. It's not the hottest spot. Dallas College, we've already talked about. What does Together for Children do for us, Dee?
They do the intensive leadership training that is like, it normally would be about a 9-month program. We kind of forced it a little bit better, but a little time consuming there. But it is a program. They are out of Austin. They've been in business for a while. They've been doing this for a while. They actually just got awarded a TWC grant for childcare staff retention activities, which we are part of. They got about 9 workforce boards that will be working with them on this to try to do some staff retention activities. That's going to be very interesting. That's one of those projects that Susan kind of mentioned where TWC has to set aside quality money, and that's what they're doing. They're pushing out RFPs to help with some of the areas of retention. That was one of their main priorities, but that's what they do. Campfire does a director's training as well. They do CDA. We have not utilized the program for CDA, but are considering it. They did propose that this time, and especially now that it's online, we might be trying to do a little bit more with them on that. First 3 years is I want to say reflective training.
Yeah, it's reflective supervision. Yeah.
Supervision. There we go.
Yeah.
I knew I was leaving out a word. Very good training. Awesome. But we're excited with partnering with them about that too. And so these are new people that have come around this time in a different capacity in working with childcare. And Childcare Group actually manages all of the projects that we go and get these different vendors to do because they have the relationships with the providers already. So they help us recruit, they help us track the services, they help us get people, help us organize so we can not duplicate the services and have different cohorts going at different times throughout all of the programs. So they kind of help us make it happen.
And Dee, what in this is regional that we don't want to disrupt? Just the assessors?
The assessors, which is required, that's part of that, the $700,000 that we put aside, and we're able to put a little bit more if we need to. We have partnered with North Central and Tarrant, so we wouldn't have to hire individuals for these certifications that come up at different times. So we're all working together with about 15 assessors on our list. It was a procurement that our board did to organize it across the 3 programs. Childcare Group actually manages it with North Central and Tarrant, and we assign them as needed. We have a flat rate. You may have seen that in the last board packet. Now we're including virtual assessments to get providers at least Texas Rising Star 2, just to get them in, which gives them some perks from coming into the program where we can help them advance to 3 or 4. So we're starting that process again. So that's one that we really don't want to touch right now because that's actually working across the region. And that way it gives us some continuity and consistency across all 3 programs because we have overlapping providers in areas. So that way we're looking at the same, we know that we're evaluating the same.
So you said reprocuring quality next spring programs, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the time frame. Let me ask a hypothetical question. If you decided we want to put all our money into, and I'm not suggesting this is what we do, but I'm just asking, can you, all of it into assessors and driving toward Texas Rising Stars, or Texas TRS, could you do that and have not a procurement for other training providers? I'm not, again, suggesting that would be, but if you want to say philosophically, we're going to drive quality and we believe this is the best way to do it. Again, not recommending that, I'm just asking, could you put all the money in that basket?
The short answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Procurement would have to be crafted in such a way that you
Yeah.
didn't leave the door open to competition that didn't follow that script.
Gotcha.
That's why this formulating a plan around quality money is very critical now. If you want to make it hallmark, then we procure along those guidelines and we don't open it up as a cattle call. We
Right.
say, this is what we're looking for, and responsible vendors should apply for that money. So that's the only.
Yeah. Yeah. So you couldn't pick who you were going to give the money to, but you could pick you could say, this is what we are looking for, or this is what we're
Board has
asking.
voted and designed our quality money to follow this path.
Gotcha.
And I would
Okay.
need a vote of the board.
Okay.
Ken, if you need to come in, I have asked you to unmute just to make sure you could speak, but let me know, wave at me or something. There you are. Thank you, sir. And Stephanie Knight has joined us, Dr. Knight.
Hey, Stephanie. Glad you're here.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
late.
That's okay. Thank
Welcome
you.
back to campus today, right?
We've been here since June, so
Yeah,
this
you
is
have.
Oh,
just the first faculty meeting.
So any other questions around this? And then I want to make sure that we turn the agenda over to, or turn to Alan to talk about SWOT analysis. Any other questions about quality, procurement, any of the other things there? Will you explain one time, Dee, because this is something that we talk about, and I'll ask first. Does everyone understand how local match works? Does anyone understand local match for quality dollars?
Especially local match in a time of pandemic.
So
Okay.
Dee, will you explain that? Because it's something that comes up at board meetings, and I think that having a common context is helpful. So very quickly.
Yes. So local match, the
Mhm.
state requires us to certify or get public entities to certify expenditures that are spent on early childhood activities. And we can also take donations, but there is a caveat with donations. You cannot revert the money back to those individuals that donate that money. And it is provided in a check, unlike the certified funds. So we usually go after majority of public entities are ISDs, universities, colleges, and it is a struggle every year.
Yes,
It
it
gets
is.
harder and harder every year, but we've managed to partner with Irvin ISD, Dallas ISD, Richardson ISD, City of Mesquite, City of Dallas, and Dallas College. So those are our normal providers that help us do the match. It is very hard to get in the door, and trust me, I know this because I'm the one that's been doing this for a while. It's very hard to get in the door, the right door, to understand the purpose of it, because it doesn't give any entity anything directly in return. What we can do is show you how many kids are being served in that area because of that match money, or how many more kids can be served because of the match money. It is
about what the money has to be spent on, because there are restrictions even in childcare, and it has to be non-federal money unless it is CDBG, right?
That is correct. And that is the key, the non-federal. And pre-K dollars are already matched from the state. So we can't even tap into that. That is off the top for the state. So it's a matter of, I think with the city, with DISD and Richardson ISD, because they have some private pay individuals coming in with after school or before school care, that's the dollars that we kind of recoup from them. And it's just certifying that they have received those dollars, and it has been for early childhood, whether it's operational or direct care. And so that is a task every year. We're probably 4.5 mil is what we have to match. And it's 2 to 1 mostly. And that $9 million is part of our direct care allocation. So it is within the amount of money that we receive from TWC. And if we don't match that money, then it's not guaranteed to us as well.
So not to further complicate an already complicated system. So, but you know, there's needless to say, this should should further make us grateful for Demetria and Lori for the tremendous amount of work this
Yes.
takes, and then also for Child Care Group, who has been managing and, you know, figuring out how to navigate a really complex system for many, many years. So, you know, it's no easy task, as I can attest. So thank you all.
Thank
So
you.
any other questions around that? And then I think we want to turn over to Alan to talk a little bit about our SWOT analysis.
I just have one last question, and this just builds off of Susan's question, which I thought was great, and it's the same thing, which is, in fact, I probably wouldn't ever suggest this, or there would be there's a lot of nuance to this. I just want to understand the flexibility that we have. So, you know, Susan had asked, could we put all the quality into sort of one topical area in theory to write the RFPs? Do we have the flexibility, if we ever wanted to say, you know, we want to focus in our quality dollars on coaching, and we want to focus on these 10 neighborhoods and write an RFP to scope to geographic bounds as well as topical bounds, so long as we're not prescriptive on the vendors?
I would say for the most part, yes, Alan, but we still have to meet the goal of achieving the STAR status, and that's not necessarily proved to be that helpful in the hardest to serve environments. Let me just go there.
Yeah, yeah, we have to meet the goal ultimately. So yeah, there's just a flexibility thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
D, more on that. I'm sorry, but that was
Exactly. I was going to say, as long as the intent is to increase Texas Rising Star in some fashion, that we get there.
Great.
Alan?
Sure. So I guess we'll go to SWOT, and I'll try to keep this super high level and just sort of basics on some stuff that directionally, like if we ever want to zoom into any one area, obviously we could probably do SWOTs as granularly as we wanted to. I'm not going to bore everyone with that. So we'll just go one by one. So just broadly speaking, you know, kind of the strengths that certainly I see in spaces. First and foremost, we've got great experience across the staff here at Workforce Solutions, great experience at Child Care Group. So that includes Lori and Demetria having incredible lines of communication and trust built up with Reagan Miller and the state agency leads, which is really critical in keeping us in compliance. And what I think we've already learned through this conversation is an incredibly complex system. And so that institutional knowledge is tremendous. So I think we should have a lot of confidence that we'll continue to remain in good standing as far as compliance is concerned, so long as we continue to heed the recommendations of staff, and that between Lori's team and Child Care Group leading the way, that, you know, the trains will continue to run smoothly, even in a rough year like this year. I mean, if there's ever a pressure test, this year has been it. So, and then the last thing is kind of as was highlighted before, incredibly strong fiscal management. You know, if we were to look at kind of outliers, Dallas would be an outlier in fiscal management in the right direction. So we're in very good standing. Weaknesses, so I view most weaknesses as opportunities. So I'm gonna just like list as the weaknesses area, just some things that the landscape creates barriers for. And the number one weakness is that the bulk of the dollars that come through for childcare have very little flexibility associated with them. So to Gilbert's point, we don't have that many decision points on the vast majority of the $121 million. And so I think that understanding, that's sort of a weakness overall. The other weakness that I'll say structurally is to reach kind of our aspirations, our collective aspirations as a region with regard to childcare support you know, workforce goals, it will require more resources than just those controlled by the Workforce Board and by Workforce Solutions and Childcare Group, right? We have a whole ecosystem, a lot of resources that come through other public agencies, that come through philanthropy, that come through businesses, other sources. And we only have control of one portion of that and one portion of the decision authority. So again, that's structurally a kind of a weakness for whatever strategies we might determine we want to go forward, is that, you know, we've got to collaborate. So then opportunities, I'd say one is that, and probably the biggest one is that as a board, it looks like the staff is already moving towards this, but we don't have as deep of a collective understanding of all of the dynamics or even what our decision points are, right? Just by virtue of this conversation. If we're asking the question, what are our decision points and specifically tied to what goals, then that's an opportunity for us to clarify that as a board, so that when these decision points come up, we know that it's fitting into a framework. And so that's the second thing, which is, there are some places where we do have flexibility, namely that $1.9 million in quality dollars, but maybe some other areas as well. And there's lots of, there's more good things that can be done with that than there are dollars. So there's an opportunity to create a strategic framework or the right types of dashboards so that we can have conversations about what are our priorities or what choices could we make given all of the things that we might do with that. And so I think that's a huge opportunity to maximize impact. Last thing I'll highlight, and again, the team and the staff is already moving towards this, the creation of some dashboards to help that would be terrific. And the dashboard that's already being created provides some fact base in terms of the number of kids being served, but specifically dashboards related to our decision points as a board and what the decisions, what success looks like tied to the decisions that we're making, so that year to year, we're able to make the best decisions overall would be great. And where there are dashboards, if there are opportunities to disaggregate some of that data by race, by geography, etc., just to have a very strong dashboard. And because I think we are in a moment of time where there's greater clarity of the importance of equity lenses as we look at all of our work, and it allows us to have much more focused conversations and have that equity-driven conversation. Then the last thing is threats, and there are two primary threats. Sorry, let me back up. One big macro opportunity, and this is the last thing I'll say here. And I think a lot of our conversation here has been scoped today in terms of what is our decision authority or what are the operations of Workforce Solutions, and yet the problem dynamic is this collective ecosystem. And so I think some of the goals that could be set by a board could actually be more ecosystem goals, even if we are not the ones that are supposed to find the resources. And so that will tie to a threat. So the threats are these, that if we don't set the collective ecosystem goals, someone else will set the collective ecosystem goals for us. And since we are the largest purveyor of dollars and resources, it seems like we want to make sure that we're helping lead the way and not feeling like we are a barrier to collective goals, but really helping to set that roadmap. And so we don't want to do that. So the threat, the other threat is staff turnover. So we have such strong individuals that have such deep knowledge that, you know, I'd lose sleep if any of our great staff left tomorrow. So it's just making sure we're really systems rich, as well as personnel rich. And Lori, just very directly, we've had the conversation several times about just how strong Sherry and Rhonda are at Childcare Group. And if someone were to get sick tomorrow, or better scenario, if someone won the lottery tomorrow, and were to say, there's something I can do with more impact with my newfound wealth, then I would lose sleep over that. So that contingency, the lack of
Succession
clarity,
planning on their side. Yeah.
is a threat. And then the last threat, which is obvious, is we're in a unknown environment right now with COVID. So there's lots of moving parts. There's lots of changes to the policy environment that's going to be taking place at federal, likely at the state level. There's lots of unknowns in terms of timing. So we just don't. That lack of visibility and this moment in time creates some threats that we probably can't even predict. So that's. I'll just pause there, and anything anyone wants to talk about or reflect on.
Well, it is a challenge indeed. I mean, when you talk about, as I was just trying to note here, if we build a strategy, we determine what goals we have that we have any control over, and are they measurable, and we set timelines. But a lot of this is dependent on what do we think the chances are that any of these formulas change today. I mean, these have been in place for, I assume, a very long time. So we're thinking with the state and all that, it is going to remain what it is. And it seems like the space with which we have to work is so narrow in some places. But I think it is wise, definitely, for us to have some goals that are measurable and within what we have control of. But then I just look at what is the priority, because you mentioned a number of things that, so how do we first determine what is priority with the order that you mentioned?
So Ellen, I'll push my personal belief on this, but people can certainly have differing opinions. I think that we need to be able to write down in a very clear, and that's what these dashboards can do, what the fact base is and what the options are, so that we can just have a discussion about priorities. The other two things you said that I'll just touch on, I do think there's a pretty strong chance that in the next number of years, and I don't think we know when, that the geometry of the problem is going to change pretty dramatically. I think the national conversation about childcare has picked up in a way that it just wasn't there 10 years ago. And these dollars flow through federal funding sources. So, I could very easily see a federal bill coming into play in the next 4 years that could change the dynamics. Well, and do we have the systems in place to adjust that? And finally, simply to say that if we are able to create these types of dashboards and understand those priorities and trade-offs, it also allows this board and the staff to make recommendations to other stakeholders in Dallas. So, Foundation XYZ, we see that there's a clear need in this part of town. Our dollars are going to this other area, but here are 3 or 4 opportunities that we can see on our dashboard that are needed, but that are outside of our scope of work. That would be helpful.
So we'd have a greater influence on where they would react and, okay, that makes that's good.
And part of that, Ellen, is driven by this being a workforce board and making it a conversation about what's good for the economy and the future of Dallas. So I think we come from a position with less skin in the game in terms of we're not the education arm, we're not in childcare per se, but we are looking at which businesses are thriving and depending on their available workforce by virtue of childcare availability. So I do think it gives us a place where our conversation might break through the noise. We did get movement, and I'm gonna say it was 5 years ago, February. I'm gonna go there. The reason money began to get really intense for childcare was a Paul Ryan, Chuck Schumer bill. Go figure. You know, remember those days?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And volumes of money flowed. But my fear is, does this become less important in the health crisis, less focused? I don't see a lot of focus in the federal budget on child care. They're going to keep it at a certain level, but are they going to make the difference? Are we going to say that 4-year-old and up go to the public education system, and 0 to 3 is going to require us to look at something other than child care centers as we previously envisioned them? Are we going to look at more licensed homes, smaller pods of kids, redesigning structurally what a child care center can do now to protect children from just the flu, not even the pandemic? But I think it opens the door for some massive restructuring of our thoughts about who cares for children. And it's going to be around the career women who are 25, 35 years old right now. Those career women are coming to me, people we do business with, they're saying, I can't stay in my job. I don't know how to do this. I have a 1-year-old. On our staff, we've got 3 under the age of, I think, one just born. And I mean, this is causing family stress at a level that
Okay, I'll get another one. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So if our target, and again, that's the workforce of now as well as the future. So, you know, thinking about what are the pressure points for young career families, and it's, you know, it's both parents, but still predominantly women, I think, somewhat disproportionately. So I think that's, you know, if we have, and I think this is, you know, community-wide, several entities, particularly around Dallas Thrives, very focused on increasing the percent of young adults who earn a living wage, then childcare is a central resource for that. So I would say that's one leg of that school. So thinking about that, I think we also always want to think about, and you know, I'm sorry to get on my soapbox here, but the people who work in childcare, the employees, and predominantly women and predominantly women of color who provide childcare, are doing so on poverty wages, regardless of the amount of training that we provide for them. And so I think we have to always be mindful of the system if we are trying to raise up young adults who earn a living wage. I want to be real careful that we don't do anything, whether we're setting our goals or the flexibility that we have in any kind of policy, that we don't inadvertently cause that to be done on the backs of people who already are being exploited. So that's you know, I think we cannot ever forget that the workforce in childcare is not a well-paid workforce, but most of us who have kids depend upon it.
Susan, just to put a finer point, we are the workforce board, and I cannot treat childcare as an in need or growing industry because they don't pay enough to get
exactly.
Right. Think about it from that side. If we treated it like an industry, we have to make serious adjustments for it to be an industry that we've trained for.
Yeah, and I think we need to say that out loud, because I think it's not a secret, but it is one. I think it is, most people probably don't, if they don't know it, is just they never think about it. But the workforce and people's economic mobility is highly dependent upon keeping an underclass of predominantly Black and brown women working for poverty wages.
But I think Alan brought up a good point. I mean, there's a lot of issues to address here, and there's only so many we can address. And I think that dashboard is critical for the board to understand. These are the areas that we can have impact. There are other areas that are great and could be beneficial, but that's not really where we as a board could necessarily have direct impact, but we may be able to partner with someone, like you said, within the ecosystem to make something happen. So I think, to me, that dashboard is critically important to say, here's what we can control.
Here's what we can control and we can't. Yeah. So I think you're right, Gilbert. Stepping back, and to Alan's point, one, we need to understand what we can and can't do, which, to tell you the truth, there's a lot more can'ts than cans, but there's some things we can do. But as we look at the overall landscape, because of the resources that are entrusted to this board and to, you know, TWC in general, even if we don't have a lot of local flexibility, we have a lot of influence in terms of what we lift up and say, this is, you know, this is how things are, and perhaps these are how things ought to be in terms of looking forward. And, you know, here's what we can do as an entity, but as a community, we would lift up these goals. If I don't want to put words in your mouth, Alan, but that's one of the things I wrote, I highlighted here in my notes that you said, I thought. And if you said, if we don't set goals, someone else will.
Well,
It's the
yeah.
threat, right?
And I wholeheartedly agree. And I think the Gilbert, your point, and Susan, your point, play beautifully together. So, you know, if we were to say as a board, one opportunity as a board would be to say, you know, each year we want to highlight one or two major structural issues that we want to make sure are really understood. And, you know, I can't think of a more important issue than what Susan just spoke of, given the platform that we have, you know, how important it's going to be that either the federal system or the state system or whatever, at some point, figure out how do we provide the right kind of professionalization of this most important industry, is something we can speak to. And that what we can do is be advocates or shine a light. Then there are other things from a dollars and sort of the more technocratic standpoint that we can do that should be on a dashboard. Is that what you were getting at, Susan? Is that?
It just sounds so much smarter when you say it, Alan. Isn't that what they call mansplaining? I'm teasing you.
I'm just saying it so that I make sure I'm tracking with you.
You are.
We're still taping people.
Okay. It's okay.
Stephanie, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on here. But this surely resonates with what you do at SMU, the education of people to help in educating our children. Do you have any words here about what happens on this child care area?
I'm listening with great interest to this. This, when I was at Penn State, was a statewide issue in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure how much traction we got, but I think the question that I'd like to ask is, we have control in one area, and evidently there are others who have control in other areas that intersect with us. Has there been any attempt at forming a collaborative so that we're at least all at the same table discussing our common issues and goals? Or is that a naive question in this political climate?
It's a great question, and the governor has his council, and I will say it is a diverse council. The chair comes out of San Antonio. He is forced to listen. The women who advocate on behalf of child care, yeah, it's a mighty crowd, and they will be heard. Locally, we have many rooms because everybody won't fit in a room, or in my situation with this board, I can't really be in an advocacy room where legislation is discussed because I'm on the public dollar. So I am as an advisory when I can be. But Early Matters Dallas was created specifically to create this advocacy piece.
Yes.
Then they try to do some other things, and I think the advocacy is where we come back to. So you have Melanie Rubin, who works for Child Care Group, who is an amazing authority, well respected by the state on legislative challenges. You also then have Libby. What's Libby's last name? McCabe, with Early Matters Dallas, and as a consultant who sits on the statewide board, or the Child Care Group board, the board coming out of Austin, and is she's very dedicated to the cause and seems to be outspoken on the issue, and the state does listen there. Susan, who am I leaving out that has voice and a table to sit?
I think locally, those are probably the two, I think those are two more established groups. I think there is certainly a coalition of, and maybe it's more informal than formal, of actual childcare professionals, led by several strong leaders in the field.
And so that's one issue, and I can see that the fragmentation would hurt. The second issue is I do not think that the childcare workforce will gain the respect and rewards that it deserves until we have some sort of degree granting, certification kind of process that elevates these childcare workers. So whether we're requiring, I know the push in Pennsylvania was to require degrees, and to provide scholarships that enabled people to get these degrees. Are we doing anything like that in Texas to elevate that working force?
Well, I'd say yes and no. Dee, do you want to talk about TAUIC or any of the others that we have so many advocates at the table, but the degree, we're in a difficult period, Stephanie, and I think you may have heard me during a board meeting say the most protected workforce during the pandemic has been the person who has a degree. Only 5% of those on the unemployment were degreed, but business is pushing credential rather than degree. And you heard that from Joe and from Jason. So we have a disconnect here. Dee, is there anyone out there that is saying degree around the early child other than, you know, us talking about it? But I mean, is there anyone pushing that agenda, or is it more about this credential, which in fact does not get anyone into a private for more money, but it does impact their public employment? They can work for a school district and work for Head Start and make more money. But what else is out there, Dee?
Well, I mean, now Teach is allowing you to get a 4-year degree with their scholarship, which is something new and good. I mean, that's good. But I mean, the entry level.
You might explain who Teach is.
Oh, it's through TEYC. Look, my mind
Texas Association for Education of Young Children. Yeah. Yeah.
It was like, wait, I know this. Yes, thank you. So they have the scholarships, and now you can apply for the 4-year. And yes, you put a little bit with it, and the provider is on board with it. But of course, you know, it creates them getting that credential and moving on. So it's good and bad. I mean, when you have the provider involved, but it is something that they can help pay for now. We work with the 1-year certificates with Dallas College with that was originally through Eastfield. CDA, of course, we're pushing that a lot, but then they can go, like Lori said, to pre-K or Head Start.
Yeah. So I think, Stephanie, also, you know, at the further fragmentation of the system is that, you know, Texas Workforce Commission and the CDA and Texas Rising Star is to improve quality is a push on that, really, and from that system. But childcare licensing is responsible for what the actual, you know, qualifications of caregivers are, as well as all the licensing requirements. And those have remained very low for as long as there's been childcare licensing. And, you know, and part of the reason why is because if you elevated, you know, it's a conversation. If you elevate the requirement that, let's say, everyone needs an associate's degree to be a childcare provider or whatever, anything beyond the high school diploma, which is currently the requirement, then there is not money to pay for that. And so I think that's the, you know, you elevate the requirement without the dollars to pay people what they should be paid if they have a degree.
Catch-22.
It's the catch-22 of child. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's where the funding comes from for childcare is, you know, certainly there are public dollars that help pay for childcare, but predominantly it's paid for by parents who are probably paying about as much as they can, and in many cases, much more than they really should be able to afford. So,
just to utter what's obvious, but the childbearing years are not your best earning years. So we have
That's true.
the young adults, the 25, 27, 28-year-old, having the most infants to care for, which is 250 a week. And when that was 30 years ago, it's probably 170. I mean, it's huge now. So I see young adults in the college system telling me they pay more for their child care for 2 children than they do their rent. So we've had that dialogue. Should there be some assistance or tax relief or some credit for young adults to pay less now, more later, betting that if they get their education, they would be able to pay back something in taxes or something else. And it's very difficult. We talk about every challenge you could dream of.
That sounds like a student loan to me, Lori.
I understand.
Yeah, on the front end. Yeah.
And Lord knows we don't want to open that can of worms again, do we? I'm afraid that can of worms is going to get open on healthcare.
Yeah.
I'm very afraid that, we've had people that are college debt poor, and I'm afraid we're going to have healthcare poor next to pay for pre-existing. It's coming like a freight train. And if people withdraw from the workforce, and this is our fear, when I see 5,000 jobs being offered, we are part of that for 2 days, and we don't get at least 5,000 people in Dallas to come and look at those jobs, you have to wonder if people feel defeated by the things they can't control, Alan, the things that they can't overcome, right? They can't earn more money without an education. They can't pay for an education. And basically, they don't want to get out here and get sick because they don't have any health care. At some point, it breaks the system, and we can't keep the workforce functioning. And that is our first call to action, is keeping the workforce the workforce.
Hey,
So-
Lori or Susan.
Go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. And
I
unfortunately,
didn't.
I've been conflicted here with a couple of significant issues we're grappling with right now. But being a novice, relatively recent appointee to this board, and using Stephanie's term of naivete, and there's a lot of it in here. My first observation, Susan, is that was not mansplaining, that was Alan-splaining.
Well, there you are. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, Ken.
Yeah, not many men can do what Alan does in terms of articulating a situation or challenge. So in any event, my observation, and this is at a very, very high level, but since being appointed to this board, I've really been struggling with how I can make a difference. And I just feel like I come to these board meetings and I'm rubber stamping things. I'm listening to the experts, which are right here on this call, Lori and Dee, and I get it, but I just see very little opportunity to make a difference. So I did have an opportunity to sit down with Alan one day, and we talked about this. And what really concerns me is that when we're talking about, and I look at the budget with eagle eyes, like I'm sure everybody else does, but we're talking about 2/3 of this significant budget is focused on childcare, and it's a lot of dollars. But unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of control over those dollars. And then these measurements that we have to meet. I really liked Alan's comments earlier about this geographic focus potentially. I just think there's a great opportunity there. But if you have to grapple with meeting certain metrics that you're not going to be able to meet if you just focus on those specific geographies, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of what we're really trying to accomplish. Bottom line is, I really appreciated the SWOT analysis, and I would suggest, Lori, that we have Alan present that to the board, or Susan, I should be presenting this to you. You've been in fact chairing this call. I would suggest that we have Alan present that to the board, because it was informational to me as a novice, and I think others on the call would get similar benefit.
Well, Ellen, I would cede to you about that. So
Yes,
I'm happy to
I
Alan.
think that's a great.
We've heard so much
Great
about
idea.
that speak. What else? I mean, what can he say, right? I mean,
Yeah, so as an action item, and I'm cognizant that it's almost 3 o'clock and it's also Friday afternoon. So let me wrap up that. So I think that is a great recommendation. Thank you, Ken. And Ellen and Lori, let's talk about that for the next board meeting. I
Yes.
think, to me, a couple of things resonate in terms of recommendations, particularly from the SWOT analysis. Is one is, to go back to what Gilbert said, is really saying, here's what we can do and what we can't do, because that's really important. Because you could get all excited about all of this and everybody would say, this is great, let's go. And we're like, well, we can only go in here. And so I think as we provide information, it's really clear to provide a framework as to here is where where this board itself actually operates in terms of flexibility. However, broadly, here is an opportunity to take the influence that we have that is well beyond what the flexibility allows us, affords us, and work together to set strategic goals for the landscape that again are, for our entire community, not just for the workforce board. And I think that we have a real opportunity to play in that space, Lori. I think oftentimes I'm always dismayed that people do not look to the workforce board as more of a leader in this space. And so I think that we should absolutely take the opportunity to do that. And so those would be my two takeaways from this meeting.
I'm good on all of that. I'm hearing possibly two. I want to be careful, Alan. If you don't want to put the SWOT in writing, you could do a verbal, but I can capture what you gave us here and feed it back to you. And then maybe it's a bullet, sir.
I'm happy to put it in writing and work with you and make sure that everything's phrased in a way that, I mean, the one thing I don't want to be getting into is management. So.
No, we're fine. We're fine. I was meaning that it's not baked yet, but let me kind of, you send me what you've got. I'll flesh it out. We have terms in the state organization has terms of local flexibility, no local flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
There's an LF and an NLF. You see it on the things we present. I think I can work with Dee to craft that real easily. What is available to us? I'm not sure how to do it. I want to do it more than you know, Susan, which is to move for a larger eco conversation as opposed to just what we say grace over. So I'm into three pages here of, still give the fly sheet on what it looks like, but then the flexibility, what's really within our purview and what can we do? And then one more on what does the ecosystem need to do to meet the gaps that this board identifies? Because this board's going to identify some gaps, believe me.
Yeah. And I think, we can certainly stage that in cadence because we're probably not at a place yet where at first you have to say, what can we do? And then I think that helps drive a bigger ecosystem analysis and gaps. But we got to start with where we are.
Got it.
All right. Anybody else have any other comments, feedback, questions?
I want to say thank you because this has been a very, I want to say eye-opening conversation. I understand childcare, but to have the time to really hear it in this way. Dee, Alan, thank you so much for your patience and walking us through it. Times are changing, have changed, and will continue to do so. And as Ken said, with this being 2/3 of our budget, really having the board understand it. And Lori, there's been a number of new members who have come on over the last months that I think it would be very beneficial if we take the time during a board meeting to have Alan walk through this for us.
Happy to do it. We can even set aside, we'll put it on the October agenda, but we could even set aside a block in January to do the strategic, more of that strategic conversation. And Alan, I'm willing to bring in, maybe I can even get Reagan to come visit with us.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Oh, that would be great.
I'm on it.
All right.
Good.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ellen. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Ken and Gilbert. Stephanie for being here from the board. And Dee, thank you so much for all you do all the time, but for your assistance today. Lori, thanks for your leadership. And I know Rhonda and Sherry and Tori from Child Care Group are here, and we so appreciate the continuing work that you guys do as well. So thank you. Have a great weekend. You got 6 minutes back. So
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Susan.
great weekend.
Thank you,
Bye.
Susan. Thanks, Alan.
bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.